So today is the 22nd of February 2013. My name is Laura Pitkin, and this interview is for the Ming-Ai London Institute British Chinese Workforce Heritage Project. Can I begin by asking your name?
Andrew Wong.
And can you please spell it?
Andrewwong.
And where were you born?
In London.
And can you just tell me a little bit about your families, how many brothers and sisters you have?
So I have one older sister. She's 2.5 years older than I.
Can you tell me a little bit about what your parents' jobs are?
My parents' jobs? Well, my parents have been in the catering industry since the 70s. So when they first came over from Hong Kong, they ran public houses, and then they ran takeaways, and then they ran restaurants, and so my family have always been part of the hospitality industry.
And can you tell me a bit about your education?
I was very privileged. I went to very good schools. I went to a school called City of London, and then I went to university in Oxford, and then I went to the London School of Economics, and then I did another degree at London South Bank.
And what jobs did you have before getting into the catering business?
Well, growing up, your instinct is always to not be part of the industry that your parents were in, so you do anything. I was a teacher. I was a youth worker. I worked in a gym. I filed X-rays in a hospital. I tried lots of things before going into the hospitality industry.
So how did you then come to be in the catering industry?
I think it was out of boredom, actually. I signed up to a catering course just on a whim, and since then I've never really looked back. I just really enjoyed it, and I quite embraced the experience and the challenge. And then one thing led to another, and before I knew it, it's been 10 years nearly. So
can you tell me a little bit more about your businesses and what you do?
Well, the restaurant that we're in today has only been open for about a month and a half. It's what I would like to say is it's the Chinese food that I like to eat. A little bit lighter, a little bit less greasy. In my opinion, from what I've learned around China, it's the Chinese cuisine that I think best represents China as a whole.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the style of cooking, like the influences that you have?
Well, the influences, the flavour profiles are very much based on authentic Chinese recipes that I've been taught, I picked up while I was in China, working in China. The presentation is obviously something that is my interpretation of it. So it's a little bit lighter, some of it's a little bit quirky. A bit reluctant to use the word modern, but I'd like to think that it's more with the times than very traditional Chinese restaurants.
So would you say it's sort of more catered to Western taste, or?
I don't think the flavours are catered to Western taste. The flavours are Chinese flavours. Whether it be something from Qingdao, or from Beijing, or from Sichuan, or from Hong Kong. The actual raw ingredients that go into each dish are the very same ingredients. It's just manipulating them in a different way to get a slightly different result. Whether it be taking out a bit of oil or removing a bit of pork fat, substituting it with something a little bit healthier. I think the flavours are the same, but the way that we present those flavours is slightly different.
So can you describe a typical day for you?
A typical day? Today, for example. So today started about 6 o'clock in the morning. The guys in the restaurant, there was a problem with some equipment, they came to fix it. So come in, open up for the builders, 6 o'clock. That'll take a few hours, do a bit of paperwork, go home, have a shower, come back again for 9:30, start doing some prep work with the guys in the kitchen, some butchery, some fish prep, sauces, dim sums. 12 o'clock we'll start lunch service, which will go on to about 2:30, and then between 2:30 and about 4:30 we'll either have a break, or if we've run out of something, I will have to go and run to Chinatown, or have to go and buy it from some other source. or have to call out some suppliers about problems with various produce that's been produced. And the dinner service will start at 5 o'clock and it will finish about midnight. Go home, have some food, go to sleep, and start again.
So do you mainly, you're the chef for this restaurant?
Yes.
Do you have other...
Yeah, we have other restaurants, but it's impossible to spread yourself too thin. You know, if you really want to make your restaurant work, I do think that you do have to be there for most, if not all, services, because you know problems arise spontaneously all the time in the restaurant business, and I think it's important that if you're going to put your reputation on the line, then you're at least here to defend it if anything goes wrong.
What sort of clientele do you serve, and has this changed? I know you've only been open for a month and a half. And this
But the clientele that I was aiming for, the demographic that I was aiming for when I initially designed and opened the restaurant was kind of people similar to myself and my friends, kind of young professionals who earn enough money to have a really good life, but not enough money to have a mortgage. So they have a lot of expendable income to waste on things like good food and good wine.
So have you noticed any changes with the restaurant rebranding, so with the previous restaurant that was here?
Absolutely. I think the initial restaurant was opened in 1985. London was a very different place then. Chinese food was a very different place then, different thing then. And Western perceptions on Chinese cuisine were very different then. I don't think you can get away with the same amount of interpretation as you can now. You could get away with more then than you can now. I think nowadays, you know, customers are very savvy, and you know, everyone can go to China at any point in time. You can go and eat food from various different regions, and I don't think you can bullshit a customer anymore. You can't lie to them. You can't treat them like idiots. And you have to be as true to what you're trying to sell as possible.
So how would you describe business? Is there a lot of competition?
Absolutely. I mean, the catering industry is immensely competitive. You know, and we're not even just talking about really top-end restaurants. You know, we're talking right the way through, whether it be a middle of the range, a brasserie, a takeaway, a noodle bar, whatever it is. Every sector is saturated with so many different restaurants and interpretations of cuisines that if you don't try your best to give customers something that's honest, well-priced, value for money, and tasty at the same time, then you'll go under, as a lot of restaurants do go under every single day. You know, go to Chinatown, the restaurants are changing every 6 months, and there's a reason for that. It's because competition is tough.
How would you describe your way of fending off the competition or differentiating yourself from other restaurants?
Wow, I wish I knew the answer to that. I mean, all I can do is I can only try to do what I know how to do, which is basically serve food that I would really like to eat, price it at a price that I think is fair and that I would be prepared to pay myself, and offer customers an experience with regards to service, tableside dining and whatnot, that I would be happy and prepared to pay.
What changes have been made to your business over time? I mean, I know this is a new restaurant, but I guess maybe with the other restaurants, have you made any changes?
I think restaurants have to change all the time. You know, we get regular feedback from customers. You know, sometimes they'll say that dishes are fantastic, blah, 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 and sometimes they'll say that it's terrible and that they've had it better than China or whatnot. And sometimes you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but occasionally you do have to readdress, you know, whether or not there is some validity in a particular criticism. I mean, I will change dishes regularly. I've been known to change dishes, you know, whole menus, in fact, like every day for 7 days in a row, just because, you know, things aren't working either from a practical point of view or from a customer satisfaction point of view, or even from a flavour point of view. You know, I think you do have to move with the time. You know, diners are very, very critical now. You know, they expect, you fantastic food at very, very reasonable prices with fantastic service, and I said, you can't lie to them, you can't bullshit them.
Have there been any changes in technology involved in the restaurant trade in general, or?
I think there've been some massive changes. I think a lot of Chinese restaurants haven't really embraced them yet. But when I was training with classical French cookery, you see that technology really has changed cuisine in general, especially in restaurants, over the past 5 or 6 years. In the introduction of low temperature cookery, water bath cookery, using vac machines, using high density blenders and mincers. I think all of this stuff is about streamlining a kitchen so it's as efficient and as organised as possible. I think Chinese cuisine as a whole hasn't really embraced the technology yet, but I think that it will, because ultimately, all this technology does is cut costs and save owners money, so they'll have to embrace it at some point in time.
So you'd say these changes have influenced your restaurants in a good way, in a positive way?
I think so. I think with all of these technological changes, you take the ones that you think will work for your business, and you use it to the best of your advantage. Things like using vacuum machines to preserve your food. It sounds very simple, but very few Chinese restaurants do them. But at the end of the day, if it's saving you costs, and you don't have to throw away ingredients, then why not?
What's your relationship with your staff like?
During service, terrible. It's very difficult because we're a young business, and I'm very, very demanding because I take everything very personally in a restaurant, which means I intrinsically am quite difficult to work with. If you ask them, they'll tell you that I'm not the nicest of people during service time. But I'd like to think that outside of service, I'm an okay person and I have an okay relationship with them, and we have a mutual respect of one another. I hope. You'd have to ask them.
So during service time, it's just because it's generally just very busy, stressful?
It's very busy. Kitchens are not particularly great places for cool, collective, karma-like individuals. Customers want things and they want things now. And although I wish that my managerial skills were slightly better and I could take someone to the back and give them 5 minutes time out and explain to them why something is wrong and the implications of that, when customers want something, there is no time to do it in a really rushed, erratic environment. And a lack of managerial skills means that I end up swearing and shouting and throwing pans around.
So is that how you'd describe your managerial style? I
would say that my managerial style is slowly evolving, learning and maturing, I'd like to think. I would say that I'm a million miles away from where I'd like to be, but I never signed up to be a manager. I always wanted to be a chef. The problem is with most chefs is learning the managerial side of the role.
Well, have there been any interesting incidents that maybe you can describe between you and your staff?
All the time. It happens all the time. In the last month and a half that we've been open, I think that we've probably been through maybe 40, 50 staff. People walking out, me firing people telling me that I'm the worst thing ever, people telling me that I don't deserve to live. But it's been a difficult time. We've just opened a restaurant. Customers' expectations are very, very high because the decor is reasonably nice. The cuisine's been marketed, has been something quite new and quite modern, and so we have to try our best to deliver. And unfortunately, with labour shortages in our particular industry and whatnot, it means that sometimes we have to overcompensate less well-trained staff by forcing them into a quick, express culinary education to get them up to scratch.
So do you provide any training for your staff?
For all the staff, I have to get trained because if you go to any restaurant, you have to have some form of training. I think with this restaurant, because a lot of the guys who come in here have never either worked in a restaurant at all, or they've never worked with this type of restaurant, and a lot of it is very new to a lot of them. You know, the food that we cook is a little bit more labour intensive. You know, I do require the staff to take care of what they do. I do require the staff to make sure that we get the best ingredients that we can get at any moment in time. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of guys who've worked in other restaurants, it's a foreign concept to them. I don't want to sound like I'm being arrogant and trying to say that my restaurant's fantastic or whatnot, but I think we do take a little bit more care in the way that we treat our ingredients and the way that we source our ingredients than a lot of other Chinese restaurants around. I think that will change. I think everyone's in a competitive market that we're in. I think a lot of Chinese restaurants soon begin to realise, that you can't use battery farm chickens, you can't use extra value this, extra value that, you can't use watery carrots, you can't use watery prawns. But it will take time.
I guess, is there anything that's specific to the Chinese cooking that you do that you have to train them, or is it just general?
A lot of it's just basically getting them to take care and take pride in what they do. Again, I'm not looking down at anyone. It's just the fact that the general kind of aura that you get from a lot of chefs that we see in the restaurant is that a lot of them are working not out of pleasure or education. They're working out of necessity. So they're coming from a completely different angle from where I'm coming from, and they've never had to really take care about what they do, because it's just about turning up, doing a job, getting a paycheck, going home, sending money back to China. It's trying to get the few that can put up with me and try to instill in them a level of standard of not necessarily just for me, but for themselves. Personal hygiene, food hygiene, and just general quality of work.
And in terms of your own training, you trained in different types of cuisine?
Yeah, I did. I mean, when I first signed up to my very first day at Catering college, it was in classical French cookery, and I think it was during those years when I was working in Western kitchens whilst at college and whatnot, you really realise that Chinese restaurants in London are very behind in, number one, organisation, number two, staff training, number three, general know-how on basic food prep, and most of all, the general organisation of a kitchen. How do you organise a kitchen to make it as hygienic, effective, efficient as possible? I think that a lot of Chinese restaurants are very ad hoc in the way that they organise things, whereas during those years I really learned a lot about kitchen organisation and how it really has to be a military operation in order to get, even mediocre food out efficiently to a good standard.
So how many staff do you employ?
At the moment we have 7 chefs and 6, in the evening we'll have 6 waiters, so 13 staff in the restaurant.
How would you describe your relationship with customers?
I think that it's alright. We have a very loud extraction fan, which means they can't hear me swearing. But at the end of the day, I enjoy seeing the customers. We have an open kitchen, so I really enjoy watching them eat, seeing their reaction to particular things. If they don't like things, it's good to see them not like things. If they say they like things, even though they don't finish them, at least good I can see, that they're trying to lie to me. But I think in general that my relationship with customers is generally quite good. They like to come and chat to me. We have 2 seats that are basically in the kitchen, so customers can sit down and chat to us while we work. I think in general it's very good.
Is there a typical issue that you encounter, negative comments from customers? Or?
Not particularly, but I think that I'm very accepting of the fact that with this restaurant, with all restaurants that I've ever worked in, you can't impress everyone. You're always going to get some people who say that your food is the best in the world, when I would openly admit that it's probably not the best in the world. At the same time, there's people who say that my food is worse than McDonald's. So you can't impress everyone. I think the ongoing complaints normally it is dependent on what the customer's expectations were before they came in. If they were expecting a £3 buffet, and then they received their bill, and then they were complaining that my portions are too small, then naturally, is it really a complaint, or is it the fact that they kind of misconstrued what this business is about? At the same time, if people come in here expecting, 3 Michelin star service, with people doting on them hand and foot, and a waiter standing behind them, then also they'll be a little bit dissatisfied when they leave. So, but in general, I think our standards are quite good. I think I'm quite happy with the way things are going. Customer reactions, as I said, are very, very dependent on what their expectations were prior to walking through the door.
How do you, if you do encounter a difficult customer, how do you navigate that?
Oh, I don't. I leave it to my fiance who works in front of the house, because during service time, I'm not the best person to be around. I don't think customers would appreciate my curtness and my honesty, or apparent honesty.
Okay, so you just delegate it to...
Absolutely. I think, it's just particular people are good at particular things. I mean, I'm not particularly good at dealing with difficult customers, so I just choose not to deal with them.
Beyond potentially difficult customers, what sort of difficulties do you face at work?
Staff is a massive problem, particularly in the Chinese catering, F&B sector. I don't know if you know, but basically the UK Border Agency no longer issue work permits to chefs from China to come over to England, which means that we have a massive shortage of trained chefs in this country. So whenever you're looking for staff, it's verging on becoming mission impossible. And I think I personally have kind of resolved to the fact that we can't get Chinese chefs anymore, so we're just going to have to start training Western chefs. I mean, if you go to the kitchen, we have one guy who was born in the UK, who's originally from Nigeria. We have a guy from Bangladesh. We have a Spanish guy, an Italian guy. And unfortunately, that's just the situation that we're left in. Can they do a job just as well as a Chinese person? Well, yeah, probably. Does it take a bit longer to train them? Well, yeah, definitely. But that's just the situation that we're facing, and I think that is the major issue. That if you talk to any restaurateur, they will tell you the same thing.
Any other difficulties maybe there?
And the day-to-day problems, it'll as trivial as any other problem that you might receive in any job. Things breaking, customers particularly unhappy about one certain thing, staff not happy about certain things. It's just day-to-day stuff.
It's all related to your day-to-day responsibilities.
Absolutely, yeah. With these kind of small businesses, inherently you don't have different departments for everything. I don't have a PR department. I don't have a separate accounts department, a separate marketing department. So when people ring up and they ask for the PR department, I just tell them it's me, and they ask me for the accounts department, and it's me again. So,
what would you say motivates you to keep going?
I think my major motivation is just the fact that I'm easily bored, and I set myself very high standards, which I make it very personal in trying to achieve them. I am very ambitious as a person in general, and anything I do, I want to be the best that I can be at it. It could be anything. I could be a street cleaner. I really want to make sure that I clean the street better than everyone else. If I'm washing plates, I really want to make sure that I wash plates quicker and faster and more clean than anyone. It's just in my nature to be like that. So I think my motivation is always the search for the unachievable goal of always improving.
Have there been any turning points in your career in the catering business?
Well, when I opened this restaurant, it's definitely a turning point. When you put a restaurant concept together initially, you picture it being very different to the reality that it turns out to be. You never think that the problems that you face will ever arise, and the problems that you don't face you think would be the most important problems before you open. So definitely, I learned a hell of a lot over the past year from this restaurant being a concept to it being a reality. It's very much a massive learning curve.
So what sort of inspired you to renovate the restaurant?
I think more so than anything, I was getting kind of bored cooking Western cuisine. I had a lot of ideas on things that I wanted to do with Chinese cuisine, and particular dishes that I really thought that customers would enjoy, and some of them that they couldn't get at the moment. And more to the point, I wanted the restaurant to be a kind of expression of who I am, which is why ultimately it had to be Chinese to some degree, because that's my heritage.
Would you say there's any special person or event that's had an impact on your career?
Well, I would have never got into the catering industry if my father didn't pass away, so I'll probably be that, you know. He never wanted me to be part of the catering industry, and in all honesty, I never really wanted to be part of the catering industry. I would never have signed up to that day at catering school if he was still alive, so that would definitely be the big personal moment which would have indirectly completely orchestrated my career path over the past decade.
What would you say the best thing about your job is?
The best thing I would say, from a creative point of view, I would say it's the fact that I can go in at any particular day with an idea and I can turn it into a reality. From a managerial point of view, because it's my restaurant, I don't need to answer to anyone. That's also very, very good. So it's the freedom that I have to not necessarily do as I wish, but within boundaries, I have near enough a freedom of both expression and work life as I choose, which happens to be 14, 16-hour days.
What's the worst thing?
The worst thing about my job is the fact that it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. If my fiancée didn't work with me, she would have done to me a long time ago. And in all honesty, I don't think chefs can ever really have a proper family life until they start making sacrifices on the work front. And that scares me a little bit. And I think that's probably going to be the worst thing about my job, is the fact that there will have to be sacrifices with family life, and you may not be able to sit down and have dinner with your children every day, or help them do homework because they're too busy babysitting 6 other people in the kitchen.
So how does your family and working life fit together?
Oh, it doesn't at the moment. I think mine is very much a work life as opposed to a work-family life. Having a wedding in April, and I've already been accused of being the worst potential husband in the world by not taking part in any of the arrangements or preparation for the wedding at all.
How would you say your Chinese heritage has affected your attitude towards work, if at all?
I don't know if it's a Chinese heritage thing or the fact that it's just my family thing. My family in general were always very hardworking. My dad was hardworking in a different way. He was very much an entrepreneur, and it's important to have that balance. He was very much a thinker as opposed to a doer, whereas my mum's very much about being a doer, which is good because you get that good balance as you go up. I got to sort of see very nice things when I was growing up. My dad, believed firmly that we had to go out and eat in restaurants, and not just Chinese restaurants, but top-end restaurants where he thought that, Chinese food had to aspire to at that point in time in the 80s, where service in Chinese restaurants was particularly non-eventful and not particularly great. He used to always make comparisons on where Chinese culture generally just fell short a little bit with regards to the catering industry. So he showed us nice things, and without that, I would never have had any kind of interaction with that kind of phenomena in society. But at the same time, my mum's a workaholic and a serial Scrooge, and extremely thrifty and money saving on every level. So it's really good to have that balance, in the sense I do try to compare my my working hours to what she works, and after 10 years, I still haven't managed to match her. So
do you see your attitude towards work comes from your parents?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know whether it's a cultural thing because I don't know enough Chinese families to really say generally it's just a Chinese thing. But for me personally, it's definitely a family thing as opposed to a cultural thing.
Are there any experiences that shaped your attitude towards work?
Growing up, we were made to work from a very, very young age. Too young, according to the law. I was washing plates in a restaurant when I was 10. I remember I'd get paid just enough to pay for my batteries in my Walkman to last me the shift. But yeah, we've always been told to work, and if we weren't working in a restaurant, then me and my sister were encouraged to go out and do anything, do any kind of job, regardless of what it was, whether it be an office job or in a gym or voluntary work, anything, just to not sit in a house and be a bum in general.
So I guess you mentioned that you don't ever see yourself working in the catering industry. So at that time when you were washing the dishes in the kitchen, you ever saw yourself? Absolutely,
yeah. I never ever thought that I would spend the rest of my life in a kitchen. And also when I was growing up, I don't know, I think I get this kind of general impression from a lot of kind of British-born Chinese young adults now who kind of grew up in the 80s. And you kind of grow up with a kind of reservation about your Chinese heritage, and you're almost embarrassed and you're almost kind of wanting to shy away from it as much as possible. And the two things that people think about when they think of Chinese people are Chinese food and Bruce Lee. And I ended up doing martial arts and working in a Chinese restaurant, so I failed on both fronts.
What do you do for recreation?
I haven't done anything recreational in the past 4 months. Before that, I like to do martial arts. I like to do some boxing. I like to go to the gym. I like to eat out. I do like to eat out. That's probably the one thing I still manage to do occasionally. I wish there were a few more restaurants that were open on Sundays, but I don't open my restaurant on Sundays, so I can't really judge other people.
And we know you're involved with things outside your restaurants. So you help Ming-Ai promote healthy Chinese cooking in schools, and you've got a training kit. You've got a training kitchen.
It's a work in progress, basically.
Would you encourage other young people to get involved in the catering business?
I think so. I would definitely. I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to open a restaurant, but I'd definitely encourage ambitious young people from a similar background as myself, Chinese background, to at least consider going into the catering industry. I think that is very rewarding. I don't think it is a second-class occupation. I don't think that your parents' friends will judge you too badly, and I think it's very rewarding, most importantly.
So, what would you say the main factors are in maintaining a successful business?
Hard work and a little bit of luck.
Is there anything else that you feel we haven't covered that related to the job that you'd like to talk about?
No, it's just long hours. I think when people join the industry, whether or not they've just been recreational chefs who've been watching too much MasterChef, or they're people who had Saturday jobs in a kitchen, I don't think any of them ever anticipate how hard physically and mentally it can be. As I said, days can be 12, 13, 14 hours. You might get a break in the middle of the day where you basically just have a power nap, and then you're back at work, and then you're back into a really hot kitchen for the next 6 hours. It is extremely demanding, and I see a lot of chefs who come into the kitchen saying that they love cooking and how much they love cooking this and cooking that, and my initial reaction is don't be a chef if that's the way you feel. I think if you're into repetitive mundane tasks and enjoy doing it really well, then be a chef. I think if you're one of these chefs who likes to create things, well, probably isn't the best occupation for you.
I'm going to ask about from the old restaurant that was here, whether you kept any themes or any.
It's funny you should say that, because there were certain things we did keep or we brought back purely from a reminiscent point of view for myself. Like, we had a waiting room down in this basement in 1985, which was slowly taken out to accommodate more customers. I made the decision to lower the capacity of the restaurant, to put the waiting room back, That's a very nostalgic kind of thing. And the chairs that we use here, they're what I perceive to be a modern interpretation on what the original chairs were. So if you look at them, very few Chinese restaurants use this particular chair. I mean, people have told me they're not particularly comfortable and they look a bit Nordic. But my attraction to them was the fact that they were, in my opinion, a modernised version of that very same chair that we used in 1985.
In terms of the food, do you think it's kept any?
Ultimately, restaurants are about feeding guests, making them happy with a concept. I think that the concept that I have is very similar to the concept that my father would have had in 1985, which is basically, utilising the knowledge that he had at that time on Chinese gastronomy and basically sharing that with, London. And I think that my position is no different. It's just the fact that in 2013, the wealth of knowledge that is available to myself is just 1,000,000 times more than was available to him. He probably had the one cookbook and my grandma's recipes and nothing else. Whereas nowadays, I can go onto the internet and I can find a recipe for making Yunnan cheese, from unpasteurized milk, which 30 years ago was just completely unheard of.
Actually, I know you went to China to learn different techniques. Would you say that's influenced?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's about learning techniques. I think it was more to do with just picking up a general feel. Whenever you start talking to guests about the food that you serve and the cuisine of the restaurant, a lot of the time they're always initially very suspicious unless you really can say that you've kind of immersed yourself. So the places that I went to, I worked in various people's kitchens in China. A lot of the time, I only took away maybe one or two recipes from each place. I think more so I took away a general feeling of what I thought that area was about and what I thought that food was about. I think the food that we serve on the menu is kind of my interpretation of that experience at that particular place, at that particular moment in time. For the tasting menu, basically it's an 8-course menu where it's my interpretation of a particular region within each course. So it starts off in Hong Kong, so we serve our guests my interpretation of very, very famous dim sums, so hagao, silmai and silver bao. And then we move on to street snacks. So we have, at the moment, we have a tea egg, but it's my interpretation of a tea egg. So it's soft and runny in the middle, as opposed to being brown and rock hard like you'd get in China. And then they move through different courses from Qingdao to Sichuan to Fujian and stuff. Where did the idea come from? I just thought it was a good idea. I think that we live in a kind of in a London at the moment where everyone thinks that they're a foodie and everyone aspires to be a foodie for some strange reason, and they never necessarily want an authentic experience, but they want to think that they have an authentic experience so they can walk away from a restaurant feeling really intelligent and really cultured and whatnot. And I'm no different. And so I like to put myself in that position, and I thought what would be something that I would find quite interesting and quite different, and what I would like to try and see from Chinese restaurants. So we put the menu together. Without training the waiting staff, it's just a series of dishes, which, it'll be no different to going into any other Chinese restaurant. But I think that the way that we've trained the staff, in the way that they explain each dish and each course and each particular region that it comes from, I think that really becomes an experience. I think with a lot of Chinese restaurants, the food is great, but it lacks a bit in the experience department. You don't walk away thinking, wow, I really thought that was a bit of a journey. Unlike a lot of Western restaurants or Italian restaurants or Spanish restaurants, where you really walk away from the restaurant thinking, wow, that was a really memorable experience and a journey and an emotional experience. I just wanted to try to instill a bit of that into a Chinese dining experience.
Would there was a divisional bell, is that right, in the restaurant?
Oh yeah, there was.
Yes.
But we changed the name, so we had to take it out. We still have a plaque for it, yeah. Yeah, we still have a plaque for it. It's nothing special. It's an old-fashioned cronies club. Well, House of Parliament.
You said that Chinese and Western restaurants have a very different working culture. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think most importantly, I think that Western kitchens nowadays, in 2013, are filled with more motivated, ambitious young people than Chinese chefs. Inherently, if you're dealing with a different mindset to start with, the individuals in your kitchen, they're going to be run in a completely different way. I think Chinese kitchens nowadays are filled with people who work out of necessity. It's unfortunate. I've met some Chinese people looking for jobs who I wish I'd rather not met, and I'm slightly embarrassed to have met them. Their lack of ambition, their lack of motivation, their general motivation for wanting to do a job in general has been quite disgusting. So I think that is the major difference, I think, at the moment. You know, if you're starting from a base level with a different mindset, then inherently, you know, the expression of that will ultimately be different as well.
Do you see that changing anytime soon?
Well, it goes back to your first question. Do you think there'll be more young Chinese people wanting to get into the catering industry? In all honesty, probably not. You know, I ask a lot of my friends, you know, would you rather be a chef or a lawyer or a chef or a doctor? And chances are 95% of them will say doctor and lawyer. And until that changes, we either have loads of Chinese restaurants operated by Western chefs, which does happen a lot now. Massive chains have executive chefs that are Western, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Or two, we just watch the general standards of Chinese cuisine slowly slip downwards, which I'm going to say quite controversially that I think is slowly happening. You know, because it's tied in with immigration. If you can't bring, you know, well-trained, passionate people into the country to cook Chinese food, then you can't expect Chinese food to flourish in London. It's a catch-22, and you can say that you can train Western people, but unless you have talented, motivated, ambitious people to train them to start with, then what are you teaching these people? You know, you're just teaching them substandard Chinese cuisine to start with.
So can I just ask you about the inspiration for the design of restaurant interior design?
The design of the restaurant was focused around initially a kind of tapas-esque kind of feel to it. I think a lot of times when you go to eat in Chinese restaurants, you think that you have to stay there. It feels like you have to stay there for quite a long time. And I wanted to give people an opportunity to see Chinese cuisine in a kind of lighter, quicker, more kind of instantaneously friendly environment. Which is why we have a bar that people can sit on, they can order food, which is why our dim sum menu, I don't price it per portion, but I price it individually by dumplings, because I want people to just try different dumplings as opposed to filling themselves up with one particular type of dumpling. It's really difficult for the kitchen to do that, but we do it because we feel that's more in line with the concept for the restaurant.
In terms of we noticed you've got a lot of Chinese pieces around. Did you consciously pick that for?
I wish they were, but they're not really. A lot of them are just stolen from my mum's house. But with the designing stuff, actually, the good thing is because I have some really talented friends, this project for building this restaurant was about, number one, saving money, and number two, just really seeing how talented my friends really were, and they all chipped in to do a little bit, whether it would be the meet and greet station or the screens or some type of covering for the menu and stuff. All of it was done by one, if not more, of my friends. And you know, when I see the restaurant now, I really do see it as a kind of a collection of a group of people, as opposed to something that was, you know, in my head and that I jotted down overnight.
We noticed actually on the menu the design of the symbol of the restaurant. Is that your father's name, or is it?
No, that's the original Chinese name for the restaurant. It's the Gunman. That actually was a stamp that I had made randomly in a shopping mall in China somewhere. I can't remember while I was there. And one day I just printed it and sent it to my friend who's a graphic designer, and she turned it into the logo for the restaurant. And serendipity just works that way sometimes.
So you didn't change the Chinese name of your...
No, I didn't. That was a conscious decision, basically. So I was quite adamant that we had to change the English name, because I thought we needed a fresh start. It's been 20 odd years since we opened, and I think for the kind of growth of the restaurant in a London scene where it's so competitive, I think it was important to have something new and fresh. But at the same time, I didn't want to change the Chinese name because, you know, it has a sentimental value to it, and also a lot of our Chinese guests are quite accustomed to the name and have a relationship with the name, and I didn't really see any kind of harm in keeping the Chinese name.
So do you still got a lot of the old customers?
A lot of them probably aren't alive anymore, but you know we do get a few. Probably not from as far back as 1985, but probably some from the early 90s still, yeah.
And we want to ask you about your mahjong chocolates.
Oh yeah.
We've all sampled them. So what was your idea behind that?
The idea behind that, I was in a market in Hong Kong, and with most things, I'm quite interested in different chocolates and different designs and stuff in general. So I was just rummaging through their massive collection, and these mahjong pieces popped up, and I thought they had to be taken. So I basically cleaned out the shop's entire supply of these mahjong molds, and took them back to England. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to hand paint every single one of them. But the first original set were literally painted, so they were identical to mahjong pieces. The Chinese chess pieces, we've got those, and we've also got a few other like double happiness things and stuff like that.
Is there a big demand for that from customers?
Oh, yeah. It's surprising actually. I don't know if it's more worrying than anything, the fact that people come here and have a meal and the only thing they remember are the mahjong chocolates. But any good talking point's a good. Any talking point's a good talking point. It's just. I think it's a nice way to end a meal. It's the same way. It's the same reasoning that I was very determined to make sure that we put some care into the desserts in the menu. I think Chinese cuisine isn't particularly strong when it comes to dessert, but I think from a dining point of view, I think that desserts are very important because it's the last thing you eat, and it's the last thing that you will walk away with. You probably still have residues of dessert as you walk out the restaurant. I think it's very important that customers leave with a pleasant reminder of the experience they had in the restaurant. So whether it be the chocolates or the desserts, we really tried our best to make sure that we did the best that we could with the desserts and the petit fours and the after dinner chocolates.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. It's been really fascinating.
Pleasure.
Yeah, great. Thank you.